So we've come to this point, we know we're unique, but we've fallen into a mistaken perception that we're separate from each other. That is what we're now waking up to remember is an illusion. The wholeness of our universe expresses itself in radical diversity, radical differentiation, and yet exists and evolves in its wholeness. So that's the journey I think we've been on. We're now waking up with that uniqueness to remember too that we're inseparable. So now what? It seems to me that we're on this threshold of a conscious evolution where with all of the journey, every single step we've taken to this point, we can wake up to the invitation of our universe, which to me is an invitation to consciously evolve and go on the next chapter of this incredible journey that we're all on together.
Welcome to the Mindset Game podcast. I'm Vered Kogan, and it is the biggest of all honors for me to introduce you to Dr. Jude Currivan today. Jude, thank you for coming on the show. I would like to share a quick introduction with our listeners who don't already know about you. Jude is a cosmologist, planetary healer, futurist, author, Evolutionary Leaders Circle member, and previously a senior UK-based international businesswoman. She has a master's degree in physics from Oxford University, specializing in cosmology and quantum physics, and a Ph.D. from the University of Reading in archaeology, researching ancient cosmologies. Having traveled to over 80 countries and worked with traditional wisdom keepers, she is a lifelong researcher into the unitive nature of reality, and we will touch on that in our conversation today. Jude is the author of 7 nonfiction books, including the award-winning The Cosmic Hologram, and The Story of Gaia, and I highly recommend that you check out her books and her many writings on her website, and we'll talk more about that. Since 1998, Jude has been in service to collective and planetary healing. And in 2017, she co-founded WholeWorld-View, aiming to empower transformational change in the world. In September of 2024, she launched an incredible short film titled A Radical Guide to Reality, which is freely available on YouTube and in 17 languages. And I highly recommend that you search for that on YouTube. Again, it's called A Radical Guide to Reality. You can also find it at www.wholeworld-view.org because it is absolutely incredible. And Jude, welcome again to the show. It is really one of the delights of my life to have this conversation with you. And I mean that wholeheartedly because your work is very much aligned with what I believe that we all need to remember about who we really are in order to dissolve a lot of the discord that is going on and to bring us back to the heart and to be unified as brothers and sisters in this world and this universe. So thank you.
Thank you, Vered, and it's my wholehearted delight to be with you today. And I'm so excited to see where we go with our conversation.
Me too. So how about we start with a little bit about you. Tell us a little bit, who are you? A little bit about your background, because it's absolutely fascinating.
Well, as you can probably guess, and all our listeners can guess, I'm English, I'm British. I grew up in the North Midlands of England in a mining community. My dad and grandfather were both coal miners. So grew up in a very modest surroundings and as you'll appreciate, not academic whatsoever. And so I was a little bit like a cuckoo in a nest. And my mum, who is extraordinary, all my questions from very young were always, why? And mum, who'd left school at 14, but was so smart and so wonderfully intuitive, did what she could to answer my questions, but then sort of pointed me at the local library and said, go figure, go explore. So my lifelong journey has been one of curiosity. And it's been curiosity about the nature of reality itself, the really deep questions. And so it's been a scenic route, as you mentioned in your kind introduction, and even more scenic than that. And also I've been experiencing what we might refer to as supernormal phenomena since I was a very young girl. So telepathy, precognitive dreams. And so I've walked between worlds all my life. And so my not just my understanding, but my experience of the nature of reality is that beyond this glorious, wondrous world of ours and universe, there is even greater realities. And yet, while I was young, I sort of wanted to escape to those. I now realize how privileged we are to walk this beautiful earth walk on our beloved planetary mother Gaia. So it's all of that and more, and all of those steps, like your steps, have brought me to today and our conversation. And I'm so delighted they have.
And as we all know, there is a lot of complexity, a lot of rapid change, radical change going on in our world. And with that, also a lot of polarization. What do you believe is the reason for that, if there is a reason?
My sense is that our universe, our, I would say, meaningfully existing and purposely evolving universe, has been on an evolutionary journey for nearly 14 billion years, from the very simplest start point to now. And that journey of complexity has involved ever greater levels of individuated self-awareness. So over that 14 billion years, moving from hydrogen and helium through stars and black holes and galaxies to planetary systems and water planets like ours, and biological organisms, from single cell to multi-cell to ecosystems to us. So that journey, as I write about in the Story of Gaia and A Radical Guide to Reality very briefly tells that story, has brought us to this point. That journey, it seems to me, though, of self-awareness and individuation has involved a journey over the last few thousand years where we've moved from being very much perceiving that we're part of a web of life to a deeper sense of individuation. And we can go into that in great depth. But that level of individuation has progressively moved us away from that knowingness of who we really are, that we're inseparable from the entirety of our universe, to this self-awareness. And I'm going to say selfishness without judging selfishness. And I'm going to say individuality without any blame or shame or whatever on that. What it's done, it seems to me, is we've walked to this point so that we now know that we are unique microcosms. We are unique. There is no other Vered in this world. There is no other Jude. Just as the leaves on every tree are different, so each and every human being is uniquely different. And yet we're part of the same human family, the same planetary family, the same universal family. So we've come to this point. We know we're unique, but we've fallen into a mistaken perception that we're separate from each other. And that is what we're now waking up to remember is an illusion. The wholeness of our universe expresses itself in radical diversity, radical differentiation, and yet exists and evolves in its wholeness. So that's the journey I think we've been on. We're now waking up with that uniqueness to remember too that we're inseparable. So now what? Because it seems to me that we're on this threshold of a conscious evolution where, with all of the journey, every single step we've taken to this point, we can wake up to the invitation of our universe, which to me is an invitation to consciously evolve and go on the next chapter of this incredible journey that we're all on together.
Thank you for sharing that. And I appreciate the emphasis on our interconnection, because I think that there has been kind of an either or mindset, right? Either we're individuals, right? unique or we're interconnected. And what we're learning is that it's absolutely a both and. And as you said, there is a reason why we needed to know about our uniqueness, the meaning that we bring, the value that we bring, and that it is our unified, collective existence, if you will, the collaboration that really is what is needed to help us to evolve to our next level.
Absolutely. And you know, when we look at the whole universal evolutionary journey and that of our planetary home, of our beloved Gaia, we see that at every step where there is an increase from simplicity to greater complexity, those leaps, you know, let's go back 4 billion years and look at single cells to multi-cells and on and on. Every time there is been, instead of competition, there has been cooperation. We cannot move to greater levels of complexity without, as you say, collaboration and cooperation. Because collaboration can involve healthy competition. It's when it's unhealthy. Yeah. And so now it seems to me we can, I love what you just said about the both and. Over my lifetime, I've got progressively more cautious about either or, because I find, and I'd love to hear your sense of this, you just said it yourself, that so much is when we see both and, we can emphasize perhaps that, but nonetheless, it's a much more, for me, helpful way of finding ways forward from often what seems to be intransigent problems. Because as you say, when we're polarized,
That's right.
It's my way's correct, your way's wrong. Or if your way's correct, my way's wrong. And yet both can be true and both can sort of help to come together to a greater level that is greater than some of the parts, if we're willing to hear and listen to each other and willing to learn together.
That's right. It's been said. Yeah, thank you for that. It's been said that the antidote to depolarization is curiosity, right? What has been in life is understanding a commonality, right? Realizing we're all parts of the same whole. It's just like two sides of a coin, if you will, right? And that whenever we are over attached to one side, to the neglect of another, yes, like it's me or you, right? It's right or wrong, right? All of these kinds of things. Then we often are behaving out of beliefs that are not true, that separate us from our own self, true self. And so the key is, in my experience, has been to soften those over attachments by activating the heart, right?
Yes.
And because when we're in the heart, there is no polarization. There is only unity, and we can see the truth. And so, would you be willing to share with us a little bit about the research of our interconnection, and a little bit, if you're willing to share, about the cosmic hologram? And I'm just fascinated by the research on that, if you'd be willing to share with us.
You ask about the science, and we can point people to WholeWorld-View.org because there's a lot of resources there on the science. The books do that. Radical Guide to Reality is a very sort of, engaging, I hope, introduction to all of this, not too sciencey at all. But what's exciting, I think, for me is that when I was a little girl, as I mentioned, I was already experiencing reality as a cosmic hologram, a multidimensional cosmic hologram. I was walking between worlds. I was realizing that the wholeness was expressing itself in every tiny part, and that those tiny parts nested themselves, to reflect each other and to be part of that wholeness. That was how I experienced reality from a very early age. But the science wasn't there. I was studying quantum physics at a ridiculously young age and all the rest of it. The wisdom that spoke to me when I was young was not leading edge science. it was the ancient wisdom teachings, especially of ancient India, the Vedic tradition of ancient India, the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, especially the Ishnavaya Upanishad. Thousands of years these writings have guided us if we're still prepared to listen. And what they say is that mind and consciousness aren't something we have. They're truly, literally what we in the whole world are. But the science wasn't supporting this. It wasn't evidencing this. It's taken, I'm 72. It's taken nearly 68 years on this journey for the science to stand alongside those universal, ancient and universal wisdom teachings, indigenous teachings. And sure, I love that the science, the technology, has enabled us to see far out into the universe, tiny into the universe. So we have the technology that's given us the validations, as if our hearts didn't need the validations, but I think our minds did need the validations of this ancient wisdom. But now the leading edge science stands alongside them. And so the cosmic hologram is an emergent understanding that our universe, its reality is projected, just like a hologram projects from the boundary of what we call space and time, the reality of our universe. And so when we go back nearly 14 billion years to its smallest beginning moment, so as space has expanded ever since, as time's flowed forward ever since, the boundary of our universe, the boundary of space-time, has been able to project more and more and more and more meaningful information to be experienced as its evolutionary journey. And so, it's what I love about this model. First of all, it's founded on consciousness, universal mind and consciousness, which is something that I think most of the great pioneering scientists adhere to. People like Einstein and Max Planck and Schrödinger and David Bohm, they too appreciated what the ancient Indian teachings show us. And now the science is backing this up because it's showing us at every scale of existence and across numerous fields of research, the patterns of the cosmic hologram, the relational patterns that we call fractals, play out at every scale of existence, and not just in the so-called natural world, but in human collective behaviors. Underpinning ecosystems are the same informational patterns that underpin the internet, all the nodes, all the connections of the internet. What underpins the frequency and destructive power of earthquakes, a power law, is also, when we analyze human conflicts, the same relationships between frequency and destructive power. But what that shows, Vered, is that if the same patterns underpin conflicts, they can underpin peace. It just is calling us to raise, if you like, the vibration, the frequency, the collective perception and awareness of all that we're sharing and speaking to now, of this wholeness of reality, that we can evolve, where peace is the natural outcome of that worldview. We just see it through different eyes, of a worldview of wholeness.
Can you share with us a little bit more about these attractor patterns, if you will? Because, it's fascinating, as you said, if we can have an attractor pattern for conflict, right, for all of these discord that we're having, then we can evolve our collective consciousness to, shift into an attractor pattern for peace and unity. And that just in and of itself is bringing a lot of hope and possibility.
Absolutely.
That we as human beings, individually and collectively, can shift that, trajectory, right?
Absolutely.
So tell us a little bit more about those attractor patterns. What does that mean? And how can we as individuals contribute to this evolution?
This is so fundamental because attractor patterns underpin all complex systems. And so they are formed of vast, vast, vast numbers of informational points. And that's the case, and we're a complex system, okay? So we have an attractor pattern underpinning our reality, our perception of reality. So when we take the whole of the human family, 8 billion or more of us, with all of those points of information, our collective psyche, the sort of level of our collective self-awareness with all the shades, all the differences of perception, together form an attractor pattern. And from that attractor pattern plays out what our collective psyche makes up. If we were a weather pattern, it's shaped like a figure eight or a butterfly's wings, and I talk a lot about this, and we can see a lot of this on the internet. It's called a Lorentz attractor. It underpins weather patterns, but those sort of patterns underpin the appearance and our reality, our behaviors in the world emanate from that level of consciousness that is that of our collective human family. So if we go back to, say, the beginning, 100 years or more, and we're in the middle of 2 world wars, yeah? World War I's ended, World War II's not yet begun. They're connected, because although there was some movement forward between the end of the First World War and the beginning of the Second, there was a huge amount of trauma. The worldview was still a collective worldview of separation. There was still that polarization. There were still the winners and the losers, yeah? So that attractor pattern of our collective human psyche evolved a little bit, but not hugely. And in the period since, the technology has moved forward, but how much has our human wisdom moved forward? Some. So it seems to me that our residual, I'm going to call them residual conflicts, and there are 3 primary ones in Ukraine, in the Middle East, and in Sudan. For me, there are I hope and trust, the last vestiges of our collective psyche that is still in separation mode. Each of us, it seems to me, can choose love rather than fear, can choose inclusion rather than separation. And every choice we make that raises that collective, if you like, vibration from what it's been to what it can be, paves the way to a world of peace. And each and every one of us is vital to this. It doesn't need all of us, but it needs enough of us so that tipping point tips to love, tips to peace, and tips away from fear and conflict. And we can see this through the whole evolutionary arc of our universe. When a current attractor pattern is stable, the outcomes, the behaviors, the system itself is stable. But when it is no longer sustainable, it starts to fall away. And that's what we're seeing now. And when it starts to fall away, in what's called phase space, which is the discarnate realm, where all of this conscious attractor patterns form before they rise to the appearance of our world, a higher potential for complexity begins to emerge. And what then happens is the old, unsustainable, dying system, as it falls away, there's a process called flickering. And the old system is sort of flickering towards the potential of the emerging system. And then it falls back. But the more and more and more that flickering is energized, it's almost like a call from the future, an invitation from the future. It then shifts. It then shifts to that next level of complexity. And I would suggest now for us, our conscious evolution.
So for the leaders that are listening to your words and are going through a transition, and a complex, challenging shift where the old ways of doing things, of doing business are no longer working. and a need, right, an emerging need to shift the beliefs, shift the ways in which we do things, our calling. And yet there is how should I say it? Like almost like a strong magnetic force to keep things as they are, because that for the body is safety and certainty, right?
If only.
If only, exactly.
If only.
Exactly. And so the perception oftentimes is that change is scary, or the transition is scary, because we don't know how things are going to play out. And so, yes, there is this flickering, as you called it, and there's also a pull to stay as we are, to maintain the status quo individually and collectively. So how do we handle that on an individual level?
I'm not saying this is easy, but I am saying this is the reality, that the current situation is not sustainable. It's not sustainable on personal levels, on collective levels, on planetary levels. That's the reality. We're rather like the poor polar bear on a piece of ice, and the ice is melting. That polar bear cannot stay on that piece of ice. It has to either jump into the water and swim, not knowing whether it will find land or not. We're on that shrinking ice at the moment. We cannot stay there. So that there is that illusion of safety, and it truly is that. It truly is illusory, and there is an illusion of that we can control it as well. The other thing I would say is, with all of that, I think there's been a recent poll that says that, 82% of people in a survey, and it was a big survey, and it was a corporate survey, and it was on many different levels, and especially with leaders, it was an enormous amount of burnout. Yeah. Because in my experience, leaders care. They care for their people. They care for the work they do. And whether it's sort of, sometimes good, sometimes not so great, that their identity is so tied up in the work they do. And I know that from experience. It's very difficult to give up that identity. It takes an enormous amount of courage. But the reality is that that courage is now called for. And courage, of course, is the bravery of the heart. In my perception, in my experience, and I ran, a couple of $500 million businesses in 36 countries. So I've been there. And I really appreciate this. And I think leaders now have a much, much harder time than I had. And yet they are the front line of potential for change, because I think organizations have an absolutely fundamental role to play. Our other institutions, our governments, our education systems are far more sclerotic when it comes to being courageous. But I think a lot of leaders are realizing from their own experience of this transition that they cannot stay where they have been. So embracing change, and in a way trusting change. And I would say trusting people, because this is an evolutionary journey that we're all on. So the leaders that can, step into that potential for themselves, and to trust their own hearts and trust their own intuition, trust their own inner wisdom, and take that journey together with the people they are leading. Because the old hierarchies cannot, put it this way, the universe doesn't do hierarchies. It does holochies. Gaia doesn't do hierarchies. She does holochies, So this whole hierarchical approach is the old worldview of separation and materialism. It's not the nature of reality. Reality is, in terms of its emergence, is about, as you said, it's about cooperation. It's about bringing together head and heart. It's bringing in attributes, not just the masculine attributes, which have sort of been leading business from that perspective for so long, and part of a mechanistic perspective, but feminine attributes, about sovereignty, and about soul modeling, about authenticity, about inclusion. It seems to me that where leaders can realize that transformation is an inside job, and be prepared to take that journey with all the folks and in all the circumstances that they're leading. That is the way forward.
And I want to go back to the illusion of safety, if you will, of the status quo. These protective mechanisms that we have. And I think that where this is kind of bringing us to is this, the meanings that we give to things. Yes, because these protective mechanisms that oftentimes can limit our access to the heart or to this courage to access the higher wisdom that is emerging, is parts of us that are highly protective, care very much for our safety. And I'm referring to our own inner world, of course, these unconscious parts. And they're operating oftentimes out of beliefs, mindsets. And
absolutely.
And so what I think I'm hearing here is that in order for us as leaders, and I mean, I'm referring to every individual on this, in our planet, really as a leader, right?
Yes.
Because we all contribute, is to do our own inner work, to become aware of what is it that we are believing, and to activate the heart and consider, is this really true?
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that I've experienced, and I really understand this, is that when you are a leader in the sort of the current paradigm, as it were, you're in an organization, for example. So I agree with you, everyone is a leader, and that's where I would suggest need to move into. And I don't mean, everybody has the same role. What I do mean is that everyone has their own role to play, and as a leader, to the best of their ability to play that role is what's important. But in the old paradigm and the old hierarchies, the more you sort of rose up the hierarchy to more senior leadership, the lonelier it's gotten, the lonelier it got. And the less ability, therefore, the perception was the less ability to actually share one's vulnerability. You had to be the strong leader. You were the leader here. Folks are following you. You had to be invulnerable. And none of us are invulnerable. And there was this conflation, I think, of vulnerability with failure, with weakness. And yet I've experienced in my own journey, my willingness to be vulnerable is my greatest strength. It's been my greatest strength. When I've got off my high horse of being invulnerable and realized that I'm like everyone is vulnerable, and asking for help and seeking help, not just human help, but something greater than us help, that help has come. And I also feel that we're in a situation now where more than ever, the going is tougher and yet the help is greater. Yeah. And being able to link up and lift up together, to be able to say, to our colleagues, to folks like yourself who's doing such amazing work, how can I do this? Because none of us have all the answers. And that was the old mistake. I'm a leader, I'm the boss, I'm looking after everyone, I have to have all the answers. You don't. None of us do. So there's many simple lessons here. My mum always used to say, get over yourself. That would be my best advice, I think, get over yourself. Because we are literally all in it together. We're all in this together. And what an amazing potential we have when we appreciate that.
And what happens when each of us does this?
Miracles, magic, evolutionary leaps. And not just when we do this with each other, but when we appreciate within a living, and I would say loving universe, which is sentient, when we can open ourselves sufficiently to hear and listen the wisdom of Gaia, the wisdom of our planetary home. There is so, and this is what the indigenous wisdom teachers tell us. You know, when we're vulnerable enough and open enough and humble enough to realize that we are not masters of the universe, that the universe has its own mastery, we are microcosmic co-creators. So align and attune with that evolutionary impulse and be willing to learn and be willing to unlearn.
Yeah.
Be willing to unlearn. You talked about beliefs. Be willing to unlearn, to learn at a deeper level of not just knowledge, but wisdom.
Yeah. So if we go back for a moment to the cosmic hologram, what does that mean for each of us when we do this work of unlearning, certain things that may not be adaptive to our personal and collective growth? And, when we activate our hearts, like what if anything kind of shifts as we go back to these attractor patterns that are informing what we observe as our 3D world? Like, can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think you just said a word that I think is important, because we do talk about adaptive, we do talk about adaptation, and that's quite a common word at the moment, realizing that the scale of the meta crisis that we are facing. I'm reframing that rather meta crisis as a metamorphosis, because one of the things that our universe figured out a long time ago was this crazy process of biological metamorphosis. I mean, what the, you have a caterpillar, which is a complex being of itself, coming into its life. It then eats everything it possibly can until there's not much more to eat, and then it gets to a size, and then it goes into a cocoon, and it essentially dissolves. Its body dissolves into a nutrient soup, and its immune system dies in that process. But what then comes is the emergence of the imaginal cells and the eventual body of the butterfly, which is more complex, and a different immune system. The imaginal cells, it's quite extraordinary. The imaginal cells of the butterfly were born at the same time as the caterpillar were born, but they're dormant until a moment comes in that chrysalis and that incredible complex life cycle, whereas the old dies, the new is emerging. And it is not adaptive. It is completely, I won't say completely, I mean, the breathing mechanism stays, the nervous system, the digestive system stays, pretty much else, and a memory stays, but pretty much else changes. And to the extent that the butterfly literally sees the world through new eyes. The caterpillar has usually 12 eyes, simple, side of the body, can just about up, down, whatever. The butterfly has complex eyes. It can see the world through a much more complex perspective. That is what I feel potentially the metamorphosis through which we are going. This is an emergent process. We don't know the end of it. But I have to say, nor does a caterpillar when it's changing into a butterfly. But this is something I would suggest, is the most incredible step of evolution that as humans we've undertaken. Hominins emerged from the whole story of Gaia 6.5 million years ago, when we it's not separated, but differentiated the evolutionary journey from the great apes. That was when our hominin ancestors began to walk the earth. A number of different types of hominins have done so over that period of time. 15, 20 different cousin species, ancestor species. We are the last of our kind. And now this is our choice. And the cosmic hologram that is our universe and its ongoing evolutionary impulse is flowing through us. So the question is, are we going to answer its call? Are we going to be willing to go through this process of metamorphosis where we are willing to let go of the old ways of being that no longer serve us, do not serve our planetary home, and do not serve our potential for conscious evolution? This is what the Cosmic Hologram is inviting us. This is what I feel we can say yes to if we choose to. And if enough of us say yes to whatever role we have in life, if we can serve that higher purpose, that evolutionary purpose that calls us to open our hearts, to step into that journey of not knowing, but trusting. And that's the journey that my life has taken. When I've trusted the universe, when I've trusted love, love has answered always with that kindness and that invitation to travel onwards, to journey onwards. That, it seems to me, is where we're at.
Yeah. And that trusting is so important during that flickering part of a transition between a current to a new state. And I'm curious in terms of like what in the Heart Math Institute, non-local intuition, right? That wisdom that we have access to when we go into our heart. How important is accessing that wisdom to this evolution that we are currently in the process of?
Thank you for asking that, because I agree it's vital. And some of my dear friends, Rolin and Claudia and others are working in this way. I would say it's vital. And the reason is that our whole universe meaningfully exists and purposefully evolves as a unitive entity, as a cosmic hologram. What that means is that within space-time, there is a cosmic speed limit called the speed of light, which means that we can have a flow of universal time. We can have a sort of causality of time flowing from past to this current moment and then unfolding into the future. And going back to the both and the universe, through its holographic nature, knows itself and evolves in its wholeness. That means that what you refer to as non-local awareness is a natural part of our entire universe and therefore of our awareness too. And, in 2022, the Nobel Prize for Physics was given to 3 researchers for experimentally showing what theory had predicted, that our universe is universally non-locally unified, unitive. And the Nobel Prize is only given for settled science. So I doubt now whether you'd get any scientists not saying something along the lines of, of course our universe is interconnected. At the very top level, go down deeper, the interdependence of it, but go down deeper, the unitive nature of it is settled science now. So that means that supernormal, non-local phenomena, such as intuition's our superpower. And it's naturally part of who we really are. The other phenomenon that I love are synchronicities, because the old paradigm of materialism and separation had nowhere for consciousness, nowhere for non-locality, and nowhere for intuition, and nowhere for synchronicities, and nowhere for love. This understanding of wholeness naturally embraces all of those. So by, deepening our intuition, our trust in our intuition, and I love that synchronicities are for me, they're way showers. When we become more and more aware of them, that combination, wow, that is empowerment.
Yeah. And I remember when we had Dr. Dean Radin, the chief scientist of ION's Institute of Noetic Sciences, on the show, he talked about, these downloads and synchronicities and how, if you look back to the Einsteins and all the greats in history that have helped us to create these leaps, they received that guidance.
Absolutely. I remember when I was writing the Cosmic Hologram, I was awoken with a download at 4 a.m. one morning. And as I sort of woke up, it was visionary. I really felt I was there bodily. I was standing on the bow wave of our universe. I was standing on the bow wave of our universe at the edge of space, and time was not yet, but it had the potential to be. And from that download, I was able to write something called a new insight of informational science. And I was able to restate the three laws of thermodynamics to three laws of infodynamics that brought quantum physics, relativity, and consciousness together. And that was a 4 a.m. download that I wrote about in Cosmic Hologram and the Story of Gaia. And now that's guiding the potential for evolutionary economics, because the notion that there is evolutionary potential within a purposefully evolving universe is beginning to enable us to reframe economics, not just in terms of what's called circular economics, but of course we have to live within planetary boundaries. Of course we have to. But both and there is also evolutionary potential.
And would you be willing to kind of briefly, I know that's a big ask, to share with us the three laws of
oh boy. I would, but I apologize because, Einstein once said this: the universe is as simple as it can be, but no simpler. And I would add to that to fulfill its evolutionary purpose. So very briefly, there are three laws of thermodynamics because the universe needs three laws of thermodynamics for it to be able to meaningfully exist and purposefully evolve from simplicity to complexity. So those three laws, in a way, are the most foundational ways by which our wonderful, living, loving universe can do that. Now, the first law, first of all, is a law that describes energy. And now, because we've shown that energy and matter come together, as Einstein showed, now that we also know, the best evidence we have is that our universe is a finite thought in the infinite cosmos. And also now realizing that information, and by that I mean meaningful information, digitized information, the ones and zeros that I write about in the Cosmic Hologram, are more fundamental than the appearance of our universe. So information expressed as energy, matter, is conserved throughout the whole story of our universe. In other words, the energy matter that was there at the beginning will be there at the end. It cannot be created nor destroyed. It just changes form. So atoms to molecules and stars and plants and planets and people. But its state is conserved. And that is the first law. And so the first law of thermodynamics can be restated as the first law of infodynamics, saying that the meaningful information that expresses the energy matter of our universe is always conserved. That enables our universe to exist. But it says nothing about how it could evolve, because it says nothing about space and time. So let's go to the second law, which is why we need the second law. The second law of thermodynamics is about a concept called entropy, and that's often misunderstood as meaning order to disorder. It doesn't mean that. The entropy of a system is the energetic microstates of that system. Now, because we now know that information is more fundamental than energy matter, when we come to the notion of entropy, we can describe it instead of energetic microstates, entropy. We can go, let's frame it as entropy, I-entropy, the informational content of a system. And that is what quantum, information folks are now realizing. So we can say that the entropy, the informational content of our system, as the second law of thermodynamics says, only increases through time. So if we go back to the beginning of our universe, began its simplest state, its lowest informational content, its lowest entropy. So entropy as space has expanded and time's flowed forward, increases. That is how our universe evolves. Okay, so that's why you need the second law. The third law just puts a yellow red ribbon on it. The third law, and for ages I was thinking, why do we need 3 laws? And most people don't even know there are 3 laws. It's usually the first and the second law. First enables our universe to exist. The second enables it to evolve. Also, the first law, when you expand it to information and infodynamics, it's the simplest expression of quantum physics. The second law is the simplest expression of relativity physics. So energy, matter, space-time, both restated in terms of information. The third law is that the entropy of a system is inversely proportional to its temperature, which seems odd. Why would that be? Except when you realize that our universe began in its hottest state, hugely hot, trillions on trillions of times hotter than the center of a star. Its highest temperature, its lowest entropy. Ever since a space has expanded and time's flowed, temperatures dropped, and guess what? Entropy has increased. And therefore, the temperature drop has been the driver, the way in which entropy can increase, and therefore our universe can evolve. So when you tie them all together, that's the cosmic hologram.
Wow. Thank you for taking the time to share that with us. And I think that at the heart of this work is really a self-empowerment,
Yes.
an acknowledgement, of course, of that unity consciousness, and a self-empowerment to moment by moment choose to activate our heart, access the wisdom of our heart, and allow what is emerging to be received and to act on that.
Very much so. And I would say, allowing is a beautiful word. And I would also invite us to consciously attune with that and consciously align with that, because that is the evolutionary impulse, as you say, that is flowing through us. How could it not be?
Yeah.
How could it not be?
And that alignment is that self-regulation, because
Yes.
any system, as you said, our own body and ecosystem, our God's spirit, is, it requires energy to move
Yes.
in a self-regulated way. And our job is to tune into that and align with that. Last question, Jude, as we complete here. How do you want to be remembered?
Someone with a sense of humor, I hope. Oh my goodness, that's probably not for me to answer, really, even though it was, what do you want to be? I just want to be seen as someone in service to the good of the whole, who shows up and hopefully gets out of the way, who takes this service seriously but doesn't take myself seriously.
Well, I can certainly say in my perception, you have done that and much, much, much more. And I thank you for your service to all of our listeners and viewers today, and our collective human and Gaia family. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Vered, and thank and bless you for all that you do.
Thank you. And how can people learn even more about you, about WholeWorld-View, and even more of the actions that they can take to support this evolution?
Well, certainly the website, as you say, wholeworld-view.org, has a lot of resources, and it is an invitation, really. It's got a lot of the sort of the science on there, the unitive science and the new insight of informational science, but much, much more. And on it, we, our role, our aim is to serve the understanding, experiencing, and embodying of unitive awareness. So we talk about acting local, feeling global, thinking cosmic, but on there are a lot of resources that people are very, very welcome to explore. People can get hold of me, and also people can sign up to our free newsletter, and we share, all that's coming forward, not just what we're doing, but what we're aware of that others are doing. And a lot of my work is beneath the radar because my work too is supporting leaders in all these fields to support, their transitioning, their ways forward, their service. So I'm so grateful to you and to all of those folks who are doing amazing work.
Oh, all my love to you. Thank you, Jude.
Thank you, Vera. Thank you.
Hey, Game Changers, it's Vered, and I thank you for tuning in to this episode with Jude Currivan. If you haven't already checked out the YouTube video on A Radical Guide to Reality, I highly invite you to do so. It may open your eyes even more so to this shift that we're all going through from separation, kind of our own uniqueness, to this collective, to what we call unity. And if you want to learn even more of the research behind this, I invite you to check out episode 156 that I had with Dr. Roland McCready, who heads up the research for the Global Coherence Initiative, also the Global Consciousness Project 2.0. And you can really learn the science behind this interconnectedness. So all my love, thank you for being a part of our community. If you haven't already, please subscribe and share these episodes so that we can evolve together even more easily and effortlessly. All my love.